I'm Melisande, 35, and my life changed at 2 a.m. when my phone lit up with a text from my husband Ryan. Just married my coworker Jenna in Vegas. Divorce papers coming. You're pathetic, BTW. My hands didn't shake as I replied, cool, and hit send. With unexpected clarity, I blocked his credit cards, changed every password, and called a 24-hour locksmith. By sunrise, I had secured my home and my future. Ryan always did underestimate me. That was his final mistake. If you're watching this, I'd love to know where you're from. Hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of survivors. Have you ever had that moment when someone's cruelty suddenly freed you instead of breaking you? Let me know in the comments below. The morning after receiving Ryan's text, I sat at our kitchen table clutching a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. Sunlight streamed through the windows of the craftsman-style home we'd purchased 2 years ago, illuminating the space that suddenly felt both foreign and entirely mine. The locksmith had just left after changing every lock and installing a video doorbell system. The house was secure. I was safe, and for the first time in hours, I allowed myself to really feel what had happened. 8 years of marriage ended in a 13-word text message at 2 a.m. I'd met Ryan Miller when I was 27 at my friend Amara's gallery opening in downtown Chicago. He stood tall and confident in a perfectly tailored suit, brown hair, styled just so, blue eyes crinkling at the corners when he laughed. At 31, he was already making his mark as a marketing executive at a prestigious firm. I was a budding graphic designer still building my portfolio and taking whatever freelance work I could find. "Your friend's photographs are interesting," he said, approaching me with 2 glasses of champagne, "but I can't take my eyes off you." It was a line, obviously, but delivered with such genuine seeming warmth that I found myself blushing despite my usual immunity to smooth-talking men. "That's convenient," I replied, accepting the champagne, "since her photographs are actually behind you." He laughed then, a rich sound that I would come to both love and later dread, depending on its context. "I'm Ryan," he said, extending his hand. "Melisande," I replied, watching his eyebrows raise slightly. "Beautiful and unusual. French." My mother had a thing for medieval literature. Our courtship was a whirlwind. Dinners at restaurants where the waitstaff knew him by name, weekend trips to Michigan wine country, passionate nights in his sleek downtown apartment. I was swept away by his confidence, his ambition, the way he seemed to command every room he entered. When he proposed 6 months later on a rooftop overlooking the Chicago skyline, I said yes without hesitation. Looking back, I can see the warning signs I chose to ignore. The way he subtly criticized my wardrobe when we attended work functions. "Don't you have something more sophisticated?" The dismissive tone when I discussed my graphic design projects. "That's a fun little hobby." The control he exerted over our social calendar, always prioritizing his colleagues and clients over my friends. "Amara's a bit much, don't you think? Let's skip her dinner party." Our wedding was at a vineyard in Traverse City, Michigan. 300 guests, most of them Ryan's business associates and his parents' friends. My small circle occupied just 2 tables. His parents paid for most of it, a fact Ryan never let me forget whenever I expressed an opinion about the arrangements. "My mother's handling the flowers, Mel. She's the one writing the checks." The first 2 years of marriage were relatively happy. I supported Ryan's career advancement, hosting dinner parties for his colleagues, accompanying him to business functions, always playing the role of the perfect grateful wife. Meanwhile, I built my freelance design business from our spare bedroom, gradually acquiring clients and recognition in the Chicago design community. That's when things began to shift. The more successful I became, the more Ryan seemed to resent it. My first major client, a boutique hotel chain, hired me to redesign their entire visual identity. Ryan's reaction wasn't pride, but skepticism. "They're paying you how much? Are you sure you're not undercharging? That seems like a lot for some logos and color schemes." When I was invited to speak at a design conference he couldn't attend due to a critical meeting that I later discovered was a golf game with clients. It's networking, Melisande. That's real business. Your thing is just talking to a room of artsy types. 8 months ago, Ryan mentioned hiring a new assistant at his office. Jenna Sullivan, 26, a recent MBA graduate, who he described as hungry and ambitious. I thought nothing of it until I noticed the frequency with which her name appeared in conversation. Jenna found this incredible sushi place for the client lunch. Jenna suggested a new approach to the Henderson campaign. Jenna's working late with me again on this presentation. The late nights at the office became more frequent. The weekend work emergencies multiplied. He started wearing a new cologne, one I hadn't purchased for him. His phone became a closely guarded object, always placed face down, always taken during short showers. I wasn't naive. I recognized the signs. But each time suspicion rose in my throat like bile, Ryan would do something thoughtful. Bring home my favorite dessert plan. A surprise weekend away, listen attentively as I shared my work challenges, and I would convince myself I was being paranoid. You have trust issues from your father leaving, he would say when I questioned a credit card charge or a late night. Not everyone is going to abandon you, but this constant suspicion is exhausting. And so I silenced my intuition, buried my fears, and continued trying to be the wife he had seemingly wanted when we met. Supportive, understanding, and always accommodating until the text that finally set me free. 3 months before that fateful 2 a.m. text, I found hotel receipts in Ryan's suit jacket while dropping it off at the dry cleaners. The Grand Geneva Resort and Spa, a luxury hotel in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. 2 nights king suite with a lakeside view champagne service. Dates when he had told me he was at a marketing conference in Milwaukee. When I confronted him, his face performed a perfect sequence of expressions. Surprise offense and then condescending patience. That's where the conference was held, Melisande. I told you that. He hadn't. The client wanted to meet somewhere halfway between Chicago and their headquarters. A lie. You know what? It's really hurtful that you're going through my pockets and making accusations. Is this because your father cheated on your mother? You're projecting your family trauma onto our marriage. His deflection was masterful. By the end of the conversation, I was apologizing to him for my suspicion, for my trust issues, for creating conflict in our marriage. I went to bed that night feeling like I was losing my mind, questioning my own memory and perception. After that incident, Ryan's criticism intensified. Nothing I did was right. My hair was too long, then too short when I cut it. The healthy meals I prepared were boring and bland. My design work was getting sloppy. Even the way I laughed at television shows irritated him. Do you have to be so loud? It's right there in the name. Comedy. We know it's supposed to be funny without your commentary. I suggested marriage counselling. We don't need some stranger telling us how to communicate. This isn't about us anyway. It's about you not dealing with your insecurities. I planned special date nights. I'm too tired from work to sit through an experimental theatre performance. Can't we just order in and watch something on Netflix? I bought lingerie. I'm not in the mood tonight. Big presentation tomorrow. The emotional distance between us expanded into a chasm. We moved through our home like ghosts, occupying different planes of existence, occasionally passing through each other, but never truly connecting. Then came the announcement of a marketing conference in Las Vegas. 5 days, including our 8th anniversary. I can't miss this, Mel. The Henderson account depends on it. But we always do something for our anniversary. Could I come with you? We could extend the trip for a few days after your conference. That's not practical. You know these events are all about networking. I can't babysit you while I'm trying to work. Babysit me, I'm your wife, Ryan, not a child. You're acting like one right now. This is important for my career, for our future. Why are you being so selfish? The night before he left, I gave him his anniversary gift early, a vintage watch I had tracked down because it was similar to one his grandfather had owned. He opened the box, glanced at it, and placed it on the counter. "Thanks," he said without putting it on. "I need to finish packing." He left for the airport the next morning without kissing me goodbye. For 4 days, I heard nothing from him, despite my texts asking how the conference was going. Then, at 2 a.m. on what was technically our anniversary, came the text that ended and began everything. "Just married my coworker Jenna in Vegas. Divorce papers coming. You're pathetic, BTW." I stared at those words glowing on my screen in the darkness of our home office, where I had been working late on a project. The initial shock gave way not to tears or hysteria, but to a cold, clear anger that had been building for years without my acknowledgement. My reply was instinctive. "Cool." Then, with mechanical precision, I went to work. I logged into our joint credit card accounts and removed his cards as an authorized user. I changed the passwords to our joint banking apps. I called a 24-hour locksmith service and scheduled an immediate home visit for a complete lock change. I contacted the home security company to update access codes. I changed the passwords to Netflix, Amazon, our cable service, the home internet, and every other account we shared. By the time the sky began lightening outside my office window, I had secured my immediate surroundings and finances. As I watched the sunrise with a strange sense of calm, I realized that Ryan had finally shown me exactly who he was and accidentally given me the push I needed to free myself from his manipulative grip. That text wasn't the end of my story. It was only the beginning. The morning after the text brought a surreal clarity. The locksmith, an older man named Frank with kind eyes, had just finished installing the new deadbolts and smart lock system. "All set, ma'am. Nobody's getting in without your permission now," he said, handing me a set of new keys. "Hope everything works out for you." The simple human kindness in his voice nearly broke my composure, but I held myself together until he left. Then I called Amara. "I need you to come over and bring coffee. The strongest you can find." "Mel, what's wrong? It's not even 8 yet." "Ryan married his assistant in Vegas last night." "He what?" "Just bring coffee and maybe a sledgehammer." 30 minutes later, Amara burst through my front door, arms full of coffee cups, pastry bags, and a bottle of champagne. At 5'2", my best friend might be small in stature, but her personality and loyalty were gigantic. Her dark curls were hastily piled on top of her head, and she hadn't bothered with makeup, a rarity for the always put-together gallery owner. "Start from the beginning," she demanded, unpacking the breakfast spread on my kitchen island. "Every detail." I showed her the text message exchange. "Cool, that's all you said, cool." She looked at me with something between horror and admiration. "You're either in shock or you've been possessed by the ghost of some ice-cold revenge goddess." "Maybe both." I admitted the reality of the situation finally seeping through my practical actions of the night before. I think I've been preparing for this moment for longer than I realized. We spent the next hour creating an inventory of shared assets accounts and possessions. Our house was in both names, a craftsman-style 3-bedroom in Lincoln Park that we'd purchased with help from my inheritance from my grandmother. 2 cars, my Volvo was fully paid for and in my name alone, but Ryan's Audi was financed jointly. Bank accounts, investment portfolios, credit cards, insurance policies. Our financial lives were thoroughly entangled after 8 years of marriage. My first discovery hit like a punch to the stomach. Ryan had emptied our joint savings account of all $15,000 2 days before. The second blow came when I found statements for a credit card I didn't know existed, showing charges for jewelry, luxury hotels and restaurants dating back 6 months, clearly expenses related to Jenna. "We need to document everything," Amara said, her gallery manager efficiency kicking in. "Screenshots, downloads, copies. Every account, every transaction, every text." As we worked, Amara made a call to her cousin Vivian, a divorce attorney known for handling high-conflict cases. She can see you at 2 this afternoon. Emergency consultation. I was securing my passport, birth certificate, and other personal documents when the doorbell rang. The new video doorbell showed Ryan's mother, Elaine, standing on my porch, her normally perfect blonde bob looking slightly disheveled, her expression tense. "Should I hide in the bathroom?" Amara whispered, only half joking. "No, I need a witness for whatever this is." I opened the door but blocked the entrance with my body. "Elaine, this is unexpected." "Melisande, what's going on?" Ryan called us this morning saying you've locked him out of the house and frozen the credit cards. Howard and I are very concerned about your mental state. The audacity was breathtaking. My mental state is remarkably clear, actually. Did Ryan happen to mention why I might have done those things? He said you've been increasingly paranoid lately, making wild accusations. He's worried about you, we all are. I pulled out my phone, opened the text message, and held it up to her face. "Is this a wild accusation, Elaine?" I watched her face transform as she read her son's words. The colour drained from her complexion, her perfectly lined lips parted in shock, and for a moment she seemed to age 10 years before my eyes. "There must be some mistake," she whispered, "some horrible joke." "The only joke was the last 8 years of my life," I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "Your son married another woman last night in Vegas. On our anniversary." Elaine's hand flew to her mouth. "No, he wouldn't. He did, and then he called you this morning to paint me as the villain. Classic Ryan." Tears welled in her eyes. "May I come in, please?" Against my better judgment, and with Amara's skeptical glance, I stepped aside to let her enter. Elaine had never been particularly warm toward me. From the beginning, she seemed to view me as somewhat beneath her son, the daughter of teachers rather than executives, a creative rather than a business person. She had been controlling about our wedding, critical of my homemaking, and subtly dismissive of my career. But as she sank onto my sofa, hands trembling, I saw her not as my imperious mother-in-law, but as a woman whose son had just shattered her image of him. "I'm so sorry," she said, finally looking up at me with genuine remorse. "I had no idea. Ryan told us you'd had a fight and you were acting irrationally. Howard's on the phone with him right now trying to sort things out." "There's nothing to sort out, Elaine. Your son is having an affair with his assistant, has been for months. Last night he married her in Vegas. Then he texted to let me know I'm pathetic. This will destroy his father," she murmured more to herself than to me. "After everything we've done for him." Her shock seemed genuine, which was oddly comforting. At least I wasn't the only one who had been deceived. "What are you going to do?" she asked, after a long silence. "I've already done it. I've secured the house and my finances. Next, I'm seeing a lawyer. Ryan can contact my attorney from now on." She nodded slowly. "I understand. I just want you to know, Howard and I don't condone this. Any of it. That's not how we raised him." As she stood to leave, she paused, then unexpectedly embraced me. "I'm sorry we didn't know you better, Melisande. I'm sorry I didn't try harder." After Elaine left, Amara looked at me with wide eyes. "Did your Ice Queen mother-in-law just hug you and apologize?" "The apocalypse is clearly upon us," I replied, attempting humour though my emotions were in chaos. What else could possibly happen today? I would soon learn that the answer to that question was quite a lot. Vivian Wu's law office occupied the 15th floor of a sleek downtown building with views of Millennium Park. The attorney herself was a sharp contrast to the minimalist decor, vibrant, direct, and exuding competence from her immaculate bob to her Louboutin heels. "So," she said, after I'd explained my situation and shown her Ryan's text, "your husband impulsively married his assistant in Vegas and was stupid enough to put it in writing. As far as divorce cases go, this gives us some excellent leverage." "Is the marriage even legal?" I asked. "I mean, we're still married." "Technically, no. It's bigamy, which is illegal in all 50 states. The Nevada marriage would be void. However, his intent is clear, and that's what matters for our purposes. She made quick notes on a legal pad. What concerns me more immediately is the emptied savings account. That's considered dissipation of marital assets. He took $15,000, and we're going to get it back with penalties, Vivian assured me. Now let's talk strategy. Illinois is an equitable distribution state, not a community property state. This means the court will divide property equitably, but not necessarily equally. Given your husband's demonstrated bad faith actions, the affair, the bigamous marriage, the emptied accounts, we have strong arguments for a favorable distribution. For the next hour, Vivian outlined a battle plan, immediate temporary orders to protect remaining assets, forensic accounting to identify any other hidden accounts or expenditures, and aggressive documentation of Ryan's infidelity and financial misconduct. What about the house? I asked. It's in both our names. For now, you're legally entitled to remain there. In fact, I strongly advise it. Leaving could be interpreted as abandonment, which might affect property division later. As I left Vivian's office with a thick folder of information and legal forms to complete, I felt both overwhelmed and oddly empowered. The path ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in years, I was making decisions for myself rather than accommodating Ryan's preferences and moods. Back home, I tackled the next phase of digital security. I changed passwords for our Netflix, Amazon shared cloud storage, and any other accounts Ryan might access. While updating our cloud storage, I discovered something that sent ice through my veins. A folder of photos of Ryan and Jenna dating back nearly a year. Weekend trips, intimate dinners, even a weekend at the Lake Geneva resort I had discovered 3 months earlier. The timestamps confirmed my worst suspicions. His affair hadn't been a recent development, but a long-term deception. I downloaded everything backing up the evidence across multiple secure locations as Vivian had advised. By evening, my phone was buzzing constantly with notifications. Ryan had apparently discovered that his cards weren't working and his accounts had been modified. His texts evolved from smug to panicked 5:15 p.m., real mature blocking my cards. Enjoy being homeless when I sell the house. 6:37 p.m. Why aren't my cards working? Fix this now. 7:22 p.m. My lawyer will destroy you for this financial sabotage. 8:05 p.m. Answer your damn phone, Melisande. 9:18 p.m. I'm coming home tomorrow to collect my things. Be gone, or there will be consequences. The last message triggered both anxiety and resolve. I called Amara. He's coming tomorrow. Can you be here? Maybe bring Marcus too? Her brother Marcus was a former college football player whose presence alone tended to de-escalate potential conflicts. We'll be there. What time? He didn't specify, just said tomorrow. We'll come at 10 and stay as long as needed. Should we bring anything Mace A cattle prod? Just moral support. And maybe lunch. I don't think I can eat, but you two will get hungry. I called Vivian next, who advised me to gather all of Ryan's personal belongings and place them in a secure but accessible location, like the garage. You're not required to let him into the house proper. If he has a key, he can still legally enter, which is why the lock change was smart. If he becomes aggressive or refuses to leave, don't engage. Call the police immediately. Following her advice, I spent the evening methodically gathering Ryan's clothing, personal items, golf equipment, and electronics. I was surprised by how little of himself existed in our home. Some clothes, sports gear, grooming products, a few books he'd never read. After 8 years together, the physical manifestation of my husband filled just 6 storage bins and a few garment bags, all neatly arranged in our detached garage. As I placed his belongings in the garage, I realized I was not just organizing items, but dismantling our life together. Each shirt, each pair of shoes, each forgotten book represented a piece of the relationship I had invested in, believed in, and ultimately lost. Or perhaps finally escaped. I secured the garage so it could be opened with the external keypad, then sent Ryan a text with the access code informing him his belongings were there, and that I would not be meeting him in person. All communication I wrote should go through our respective attorneys from this point forward. His response came immediately. "This isn't over. You'll regret treating me this way." I didn't reply. Instead, I called the local police non-emergency line and requested an officer be present during the expected property retrieval, citing concerns about potential conflict. They agreed to send someone between 10 and noon the following day. That night, I lay awake in our bed. No, my bed now, staring at the ceiling, trying to process the seismic shift in my life. In just 36 hours, my identity had transformed from wife to almost ex, from partner to adversary, from someone who compromised to someone who was finally standing her ground. Despite the pain and betrayal, despite the uncertainty of the future, I felt something unexpected growing within me, a sense of liberation, of reclaiming parts of myself that had been slowly eroding under Ryan's constant criticism and manipulation. Tomorrow would bring confrontation, but tonight, in the quiet darkness of my newly secured home, I allowed myself to acknowledge the truth I had been avoiding for years. This marriage had been breaking me, not building me, and perhaps its end was not a failure, but a necessary rescue. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a beautiful September day that belied the storm about to break in my life. Amara arrived at 9:30, Marcus in tow, with coffee and pastries from my favourite bakery. "You look like hell," Amara said, handing me a latte. "Did you sleep at all?" "About 20 minutes collectively," I admitted. Marcus gave me a gentle side hug. At 6'4", with broad shoulders from his football days, he was an imposing presence, but his nature was gentle. "We've got your back, Mel. He's not going to intimidate you today." We didn't have to wait long. At 10:15, the video doorbell alerted me to movement on the front porch. Ryan stood there, sunglasses on, despite the porch's shade, jaw tense. Beside him stood a petite blonde woman I recognized from photos, Jenna. She looked young and uncomfortable, shifting her weight from foot to foot, while Ryan repeatedly pressed the doorbell. "He brought her here," Amara hissed. "The audacity." "Of course he did," I replied, feeling strangely calm. "He wants an audience for whatever show he's about to put on." I activated the doorbell's speaker function. "Ryan, your belongings are in the garage as I mentioned in my text. The code is 5829. His head jerked up at the sound of my voice coming through the speaker. "Melisande, open the door. We need to talk." "No, we don't. All communication should go through our attorneys." "This is ridiculous. It's my house too. Let me in so we can discuss this like adults." "The garage code is 5829, I repeated. "A police officer will be arriving shortly to ensure the process goes smoothly." At the mention of police, Jenna's eyes widened and she tugged at Ryan's sleeve, whispering something I couldn't hear. "You called the cops on me," Ryan's voice rose. "For trying to enter my own home, you've completely lost it. I called for a civil standby, which is standard procedure in these situations. Please collect your things from the garage. The officer should be here any minute." Ryan's face contorted with the familiar expression I'd seen whenever he didn't get his way, a mixture of disbelief, outrage, and calculation as he recalibrated his approach. "Mel, come on." His voice softened, attempting charm. "This has gotten out of hand. Let's talk face to face, work something out." "Like you worked something out in Vegas," I replied, surprised by my own steadiness. "No, thank you. Garage code 5829. Any items you believe are missing can be addressed through our attorneys." As if on cue, a police cruiser pulled up to the curb. Officer Teresa Lopez introduced herself through the doorbell camera, then approached Ryan and Jenna. I couldn't hear their conversation, but Ryan's body language shifted from aggressive to grudgingly compliant as she spoke. Under Officer Lopez's watchful eye, Ryan finally moved toward the garage, punching in the code with angry jabs. Jenna followed, looking increasingly distressed. Through the kitchen window, I watched as Ryan began haphazardly loading bins and garment bags into his Audi, which he'd parked on the street. His movements were jerky with anger, contrasting with Jenna's hesitant assistance. "Should we go out there?" Amara asked, peering over my shoulder. "No need," I replied. "The officer has it covered." Ryan managed to fit most of his possessions into his car, leaving only his golf clubs and a bin of books. He approached the front door again, Officer Lopez a few steps behind him. "I'm coming back for the rest later," he announced through the doorbell camera. "And this lockout stunt won't stand up in court. I have rights to this property. Your attorney can contact mine regarding any further property retrieval," I replied. Ryan's face flushed red. "You think you're so clever, don't you? You have no idea what's coming. I made you Melisande. You were nothing before me. You'll be nothing again when I'm done." Officer Lopez stepped forward. "Sir, I'd advise you to leave now and let the attorneys handle this." Ryan ignored her. "You'll regret this, Mel. Every single bit of it." "I already regret the last 8 years," I replied, a calmness in my voice that I didn't entirely feel. "Goodbye, Ryan." He stormed back to his car, Jenna trailing behind him, looking shell-shocked. As they pulled away from the curb, I caught Jenna looking back at the house with an expression I couldn't quite read. Confusion, fear, maybe even a dawning realization. Officer Lopez spoke briefly through the doorbell camera, confirming that I felt safe and providing me with case information should I need to reference the incident in the future. I thanked her sincerely for her help. When the street was finally empty, the facade of strength I'd been maintaining crumbled. I slid down against the front door until I was sitting on the floor, violent sobs racking my body. 8 years of marriage ended with threats on my front porch. The husband who had once promised to cherish me now vowing to destroy me. The magnitude of betrayal and the uncertain future ahead finally crashed over me in waves of grief and fear. Amara sat down beside me on the floor, wrapping her arms around my shoulders. Marcus knelt in front of us, his presence solid and reassuring. "Let it out," Amara murmured. "You've been so strong. It's okay to fall apart a little." "What am I going to do?" I gasped between sobs. "You're going to keep breathing," Marcus said gently. "One breath at a time. And we're going to be right here with you." That day marked both an ending and a beginning, the final death of my marriage and the first painful step toward rebuilding my life. I didn't know then how much more complicated things would become, or how Ryan's betrayal was even more extensive than I'd imagined. I only knew that I had stood my ground, maintained my dignity, and somehow found the strength to face him without crumbling. It was a small victory, but on that day it was enough. A week passed in a blur of legal consultations, document gathering, and emotional whiplash. Ryan had retained an aggressive attorney known for scorched earth tactics in high net worth divorces, which would have been laughable if it wasn't so insulting. We were firmly upper middle class at best. His legal strategy seemed designed to intimidate me with threats of prolonged litigation, rather than to achieve any reasonable outcome. Vivian was unimpressed. "Classic bullying tactics," she said after reviewing their initial communications. "They're hoping you'll be scared into accepting an unfavourable settlement just to avoid the fight." I was exhausted but resolute. The grief came in waves, usually at night when the house was quiet, and the day's practical tasks couldn't distract me from the reality of my situation. But each morning I got up showered, dressed in clothes that made me feel strong, and continued building the framework of my new life. Then came the email that changed everything. It arrived from an anonymous address with the subject line, "You should know the truth about Ryan Miller." The body of the email contained only 2 sentences. "You're not the first woman Ryan has deceived and discarded. Attached are messages that might help your case and your healing." The attachment contained dozens of screenshots of text messages, emails, and social media exchanges between Ryan and multiple women over the past decade, including the period when we were dating and early in our marriage. The evidence painted a clear picture of a serial philanderer who followed the same pattern with each relationship, Love bombing, gradual isolation, emotional manipulation, gaslighting, and eventual discard when he found a new target. I sat at my desk, scrolling through message after message, my hands shaking with a mixture of vindication and devastation. It hadn't been my imagination. I hadn't been overly sensitive or paranoid. Ryan's manipulations were calculated, practiced, and pathological. The next day brought another email, this one signed by Amanda Torres, identifying herself as Ryan's girlfriend from 2 years before he met me. "I've been following your story through mutual connections," she wrote. "What Ryan did to you, he did to me, and at least 3 other women I know of. He has a pattern, and it's not your fault. I'm willing to provide a statement for your divorce proceedings if it would help." I forwarded both emails to Vivian, who responded immediately. "This changes our approach. Call me." In our meeting that afternoon, Vivian was practically vibrating with strategic energy. These communications establish a pattern of deceptive behavior that strengthens our case significantly. If these women are willing to provide sworn statements, we can potentially use this to counter any claims Ryan might make about your behavior in the marriage. As I was digesting this information, my phone rang with an unknown number. Normally, I would have let it go to voicemail, but some intuition prompted me to answer. "Is this Melisande Miller?" a female voice asked. "Yes, who's calling?" "This is Jenna Sullivan." My heart jumped into my throat. "Ryan's? Well, I don't know what to call myself, actually. I believe wife is the technical term," I replied, unable to keep the edge from my voice, though legally questionable under the circumstances. "That's actually why I'm calling," she said, her voice small and uncertain. "I didn't know, Melisande. About your marriage. Not really." "What do you mean, not really? You were having an affair with my husband for months." "I thought you were separated. Ryan told me you'd agreed to divorce months ago but were keeping up appearances until some tax issue was resolved. He said you were cold, controlling, that you'd cheated on him first with a client." Her voice broke. I believed him. "I'm so sorry." The familiar tactics made my stomach turn. "And the Vegas wedding, impulsive stupidity," she admitted. "We were there for the conference. He was drinking, said he wanted to make our love official, that you were dragging out the separation deliberately. I got caught up in the moment." "Jenna, why are you calling me? What do you want?" There was a pause. "I left him," she said finally. "The day after we came to your house, the way he spoke to you, the things he said afterward in the car about you, it was like a veil lifted. I started questioning everything he'd told me. I'm sorry you got hurt," I said, surprised to find I meant it. "But I'm not sure what you expect from me." "Nothing," she replied quickly. "I just thought you should know that the wedding wasn't even legal. It was just a ceremony at a chapel. We never filed for a marriage license. Ryan said we'd do the paperwork later. This was useful information, but I sensed there was more." "Is that all?" Another pause. "No," she admitted. "There's something else you should know. Ryan has gambling debts, significant ones. I found out when his credit cards were declined at dinner last week, and he had a meltdown. That's why he emptied your savings account, to pay off creditors who were threatening him." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Ryan, who had always been so controlling about our finances, who criticised my occasional splurges on art supplies or designer shoes, had a gambling problem serious enough to drain our savings. "How much?" I asked. "I don't know exactly, but from what I overheard during his phone calls, at least 50,000, maybe more." "Thank you for telling me this," I said, my mind already racing with implications. "It helps explain some things." "There's one more thing," Jenna added hesitantly. "I think he might have taken out loans or credit lines you don't know about. He was on the phone with someone about a second mortgage last month." A second mortgage on our house without my knowledge or consent. After ending the call with Jenna, I immediately contacted Vivian, who promised to expedite a thorough financial investigation. If he forged your signature on mortgage documents, that's fraud, a criminal offence, not just a divorce issue. The next few days brought a flurry of financial discoveries, each more disturbing than the last. Ryan had indeed taken out a second mortgage on our home 3 months earlier, using a forged signature. He had opened multiple credit lines in both our names. He had borrowed against his 401k. All told, he had accumulated nearly $80,000 in hidden debt, most of it based on the evidence we gathered to cover gambling losses at various casinos and online betting sites. The good news, Vivian said after reviewing the forensic accountant's preliminary report, is that these discoveries substantially strengthen our case. The bad news is that these debts could potentially impact the marital estate, meaning I could be responsible for his gambling debts. The thought was infuriating. Not necessarily. We can argue, successfully I believe, that these were debts incurred through fraud and hidden from you, thus not legitimate marital obligations. But it complicates things. As the full picture of Ryan's deception emerged, I found myself reflecting on our entire relationship with new clarity. The controlling behaviour around finances, the criticism when I spent money on myself, the insistence on keeping some accounts separate. All of it made sense through the lens of his hidden addiction. I had been married to a stranger. The charming, confident man I thought I knew had been living a double life. Multiple lives, really, juggling affairs, gambling debts, and an elaborately constructed facade of success. The revelation should have devastated me further. Instead, it provided a strange kind of closure. The disintegration of my marriage wasn't because I was lacking as a wife or a woman. It wasn't because I was pathetic, as Ryan had cruelly stated in his text. It was because the man I married was a liar, a manipulator, and possibly a compulsive gambler who had been spiraling out of control long before that fateful text from Vegas. As painful as the discoveries were, each one freed me a little more from the web of self-doubt and recrimination that had entangled me during the marriage. Each revelation was another step toward understanding that I hadn't failed. I had been set up to fail from the beginning by a man incapable of genuine partnership. The weeks ahead would bring legal battles, financial complications, and emotional challenges I couldn't yet imagine. But armed with the truth, I was finally ready to face them, not as Ryan Miller's discarded wife, but as Melisande, a woman reclaiming her life, one difficult truth at a time. 6 months passed in a blur of legal proceedings, financial investigations, and personal rebuilding. I moved from our Lincoln Park home to a bright one-bedroom apartment in Wicker Park, a neighbourhood I'd always loved, but Ryan had dismissed as too hipster. The proceeds from the house sale were held in escrow pending final divorce settlement, but Vivian had successfully argued for a temporary distribution that allowed me to secure housing and continue building my design business. The divorce was finalised more quickly than anticipated, largely due to the overwhelming evidence of Ryan's misconduct. The forged mortgage documents proved particularly damning. The bank had initiated fraud proceedings, adding legal problems beyond our divorce. In the end, Ryan received far less than the equal distribution he'd initially demanded. The court assigned the gambling debts to him alone, ordered repayment of the emptied savings account with interest, and awarded me a greater percentage of our remaining assets as compensation for his financial misconduct. My design business flourished in ways I hadn't anticipated. Freed from Ryan's subtle undermining of my professional confidence, I pursued larger clients and more ambitious projects. I hired 2 junior designers to handle the increasing workload. The spare bedroom in my new apartment became a home office that reflected my aesthetic rather than the muted corporate style Ryan had preferred. Ryan's life took a different trajectory. His Vegas escapade with an assistant resulted in a sexual harassment investigation at his firm. While he avoided termination, he was demoted and placed on probation. Jenna, who had provided a detailed statement about their relationship for both my divorce case and the corporate investigation found a new position at a different company. His gambling debts, now public knowledge in our social circle, resulted in several friends distancing themselves. His parents, while not cutting ties completely, had scaled back their financial support after learning the full extent of his deceptions. I heard most of this secondhand, maintaining strict no contact with Ryan, except through our attorneys. He had attempted to reach out directly several times in the early months, first with threats, then with anger, eventually with attempts at reconciliation. "I made a terrible mistake," he wrote in an email 3 months after the Vegas text. "I was under enormous pressure, not thinking clearly. We could still work this out." I didn't respond, simply forwarding the message to Vivian as we had agreed. His subsequent messages grew increasingly desperate as the legal case against him strengthened. "You're ruining my life over one bad decision," he complained, apparently forgetting the years of deception that had preceded that one bad decision. "I still love you, Mel. I always have." Jenna meant nothing. Vegas was insane, I know that now. Each message received the same response: silence from me, a formal reminder from Vivian that all communication should go through proper legal channels. One unexpected development during this period was my continuing relationship with Elaine and Howard Miller. After their initial shock at Ryan's behaviour, they had reached out tentatively, asking if I would be willing to meet for coffee. "We understand if you never want to see us again," Elaine said when she called. "But we've always cared for you, Melisande, even if we didn't show it properly. We'd like to offer our support if you're open to it." The coffee meeting was awkward, but surprisingly healing. Elaine and Howard apologized for their son's behavior and for the times they had enabled his worst tendencies. They didn't ask me to reconcile with Ryan or minimize what he had done. Instead, they simply expressed their affection and respect for me, independent of their relationship with their son. "You've handled this with more grace than anyone could expect," Howard said, his voice thick with emotion. "We're ashamed of Ryan's choices, but proud to have had you as a daughter-in-law, however briefly." Our relationship continued with occasional lunches or phone calls, never discussing Ryan in detail, but maintaining a connection that provided a strange comfort to all of us. A year to the day after receiving Ryan's Vegas text, I hosted a dinner party at my apartment. Amara and Marcus were there, along with several friends who had been supportive throughout the divorce, and 2 new friends I had made in my apartment building. The table was set with dishes and linens I had selected myself. The menu featured foods I loved, but Ryan had always criticized as too spicy or too ethnic. As we raised our glasses in a toast, Amara grinned at me across the table. To Melisande, who replied cool to the text from hell and then proceeded to rebuild her entire life from scratch. "You're a fucking warrior, my friend." Everyone cheered, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt completely, authentically myself. Not performing the role of perfect wife, not shrinking to accommodate someone else's ego, not second-guessing my own perceptions. Later that evening, after my guests had left, I received a text from Ryan. "I miss you. I was wrong about everything. Please give me another chance." A year earlier, such a message might have triggered anxiety, anger, or even a flicker of longing for the relationship I thought we'd had. Now, I felt only a distant pity for a man who still didn't understand what he had lost. Not just a wife, but the opportunity to grow into someone worthy of genuine partnership. I typed a response, then hesitated before sending it. Was engaging at all a step backward? But there was something poetic about closing this chapter exactly where it had begun, with a text exchange that said everything about our relationship. "By the way," I wrote, "my business just hit 7 figures. Cool, right?" Then I blocked his number, poured myself a glass of champagne, and stepped out onto my small balcony to admire the Chicago skyline. The city lights sparkled against the night sky, beautiful and full of possibility, much like the life I was continuing to build for myself. The past year had been the most difficult of my life, but also the most transformative. I had discovered strengths I didn't know I possessed, rebuilt a career Ryan had subtly undermined, and reclaimed parts of my identity that had been slowly eroded by his criticism and control. There would be more challenges ahead, more healing to do, but standing on that balcony on the anniversary of what I had once thought was the worst night of my life, I realized that Ryan's cruel text had actually been a twisted gift, the push I needed to free myself from a relationship that had been breaking me for years. Sometimes the most devastating endings clear the way for the most beautiful beginnings. Sometimes walking away from someone who has hurt you isn't just self-preservation, it's self-liberation. And sometimes the simple word cool can be the first step toward reclaiming your power and your future. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more real-life journeys, and share with someone who might need to hear that there's strength and healing on the other side of heartbreak. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the coldest response can come from the warmest place of self-respect. Stay strong, stay true to yourself, and know that you deserve better.